Imagine yourself standing in the middle of the night on a wind-blasted plateau. It is now 40 degrees Celsius. The closest solid shelter is 100 miles distant. You lack synthetic insulation, and you don't have a lighter to start a fire. As hypothermia sets in, your skin starts to crystallize and your heart rate decreases. You undertake the unimaginable in order to survive. You walk up to a recently slaughtered reindeer body, cut open its abdomen, and slide your frigid hands straight into the steaming crimson caverns of its internal organs. In order to keep your fingers from breaking off like dry twigs, you are using the animal's remaining body heat as a biological glove, rather than searching for food. This was a Tuesday for your forebears, not a scary film. How in the world did any of us make it through the harsh Pleistocene? We are delving into the most extreme, creative, and absolutely horrifying techniques of ancient human survival that were employed throughout the Ice Age. We are discussing the science of stink food, houses constructed from the skeletons of giants, and a little bone creation that literally prevented the extinction of the human species. We must first comprehend the stakes in order to comprehend these survival strategies. The Earth was a different planet 20,000 years ago during the last glacial maximum. The northern hemispheres were crushed by enormous slabs of ice that were about 2 miles thick. Sea levels were 400 feet lower than they are now, transforming lush plains into Arctic deserts and oceans into frozen bridges. The populated areas frequently had average temperatures that were 20 degrees below current standards. Hypothermia takes minutes rather than hours in this setting. In many regions, there were no trees at all, therefore food didn't only grow on trees, just a freezing tundra that never ends. Modern humans were essentially unfit for this world because of our thin skin and lack of natural fur. Nevertheless, in spite of all biological obstacles, humans not only survived, but thrived. This detective tale describes how a frozen graveyard was transformed into a dwelling by primordial cunning. You are here today because of these Ice Age survival techniques. We travel to the treeless plains of Eastern Europe for our first in-depth look at prehistoric human survival. Imagine attempting to construct a shelter when there isn't a single piece of wood for 1,000 miles. Ancient people used the only readily available building material, the remnants of the woolly mammoth, instead of wood for framing or stone for walls. These were architectural wonders, not just heaps of bones. Archaeologists have found homes made from the mandibles, tusks, and ribs of more than 90 mammoths at locations like Mezhyrich in contemporary Ukraine. To protect themselves from the harsh Arctic winds, they stacked the enormous jawbones in a herringbone manner to form a circular foundation. Heavy mammoth hides covered the ceiling, which was a dome of interlocking tusks that provided warmth. These buildings had unexpectedly comfortable interiors, frequently with raised sleeping platforms and hearths for fuel. Constructed from the graveyards of giants, they were effectively the first permanent luxury bunkers in history. However, a population needed more than just shelter to survive. What they did to stay warm inside these bone fortresses is even more bizarre. Fuel was necessary once you got a bone hut. But keep in mind that there aren't any trees. Gathering firewood is not an option. This brings us to our second approach: food systems that are fermented and cached. Calories were the only unit of measurement throughout the Ice Age. It was impossible for hunters to consume all the tons of meat from a megafauna animal before scavengers snatched it or it went bad. Their answer? The meat cache. Permafrost is nature's first deep freezer, and they would excavate deep pits into it. However, in certain cases, they required the meat to be pre-digested and high in probiotics rather than just frozen. In order to facilitate a regulated fermentation process, they would wrap meat and fat in skins and bury them in pits or bogs. Indeed, they were essentially consuming rotten beef. This sounds disgusting to a modern palate, yet it was a deliberate survival strategy for an Ice Age human. Tough proteins were broken down by fermentation, which also increased the calories' bioavailability and added essential vitamin C, which prevents scurvy in a world without fruit. Beneath the ice, waiting for the hardest winter months, was the ultimate prehistoric energy bar. Their bodies were finding it difficult to keep up with the advancements in technology. This leads us to the third strategy: body hacks for cold adaptation. Although Homo sapiens originated in the tropics, the populations that moved north started using physiological tricks to withstand the cold. Research indicates that brown adipose tissue, or brown fat, which produces heat by burning calories at a far faster rate than white fat, may have been more prevalent in ancient people. The hypothesis of cultural cold exposure training is another. Ancient children were probably exposed to the cold from birth, conditioning their vascular systems to dilate and constrict more effectively to protect important organs, much like contemporary elite divers or polar explorers. In order to reduce surface area and conserve core heat, Neanderthals who coexisted with our ancestors had even more drastic modifications, such as broader torsos and shorter limbs. Through perseverance and exposure to the environment, we, the survivors, learned to imitate these efficiencies through behavior, thus hacking our own biology. However, even the strongest body has its limitations. The bone needle, which is still in use today, was the next invention made by our forefathers that essentially kept all of humanity alive. The transformation from putting a loose animal fur over your shoulders to a fitted garment may seem insignificant, yet it had a profound impact. Ice Age tailors started making multi-layer garments using tiny needles made of ivory or bird bones. This was the pinnacle of engineering. They discovered that the best insulator is air trapped between layers. They used sinew as thread to construct parkas with hoods, tailored pants, and undergarments. The chimney effect, in which warm air escapes from the neck and waist, was eliminated by designing the garment to fit the human body. A person wearing a fitted fur suit might withstand a blizzard that would kill someone wearing a loose cloak in a matter of minutes. At this point, we began to wear the environment as armor instead of being victims of the weather. The fifth approach, social warming strategy and fire-free heating, is arguably the most humane of them. In high-wind tundras, fire was essential, but not always sustained. The issue of survival turned into one of group behavior. Humans used huddling techniques, according to research on prehistoric hearths and sleeping arrangements. Sleeping in a single, recessed section of a hut, entire kin groupings would share body heat, raising the temperature by several degrees. This was about the social science of survival, not just physical proximity. They created intricate sharing networks in which the tribe's survival depended on the success of a single hunter. Everyone stayed warm if one individual did. The arrangement of their hearths to radiate heat off the bone walls of their homes is indicative of joint thermal management. In essence, they were building a collective human battery to survive the long, gloomy winter evenings. Here is the wildcard reveal, a technique that seems utterly phony yet has been 100% confirmed by archaeology before we examine the wider picture. Ancient people used bone fuel for their fires in various areas. Due to the scarcity of wood, they found that the leftover marrow and fats in mammoth bones would burn with a powerful, long-lasting blue flame if they were cracked open and struck with sufficient starting heat. By burning the skeletons of the animals they had consumed, they were actually heating their houses. They were able to endure in the most barren regions of the world because to a flawlessly closed, if macabre, energy loop? For us now, what does all of this mean? Zooming out, we can see that the Ice Age was the ultimate test of human intelligence. Huge buildings, tailored clothing, and social gatherings were the first steps toward tackling complex problems. Everybody who turns on their central heating or zips up a winter jacket is using a descendant of a technology that a cave dwelling created 45,000 years ago. Under the duress of the Ice Age, our ancestors evolved and survived. In 50,000 years, what are we adapting to? There are still many unanswered questions, like as how certain isolated people managed to endure the most difficult glacier peaks in previously uninhabited areas. That is still a historical enigma. Remember that ridiculous situation from the start? Someone who has their hands inside a reindeer carcass. We have diverse perspectives on the person. They had a brilliant lineage and were in dire need. They ate fermented meat for dinner, lived in a mammoth bone home, and wore fitting fur clothing that was superior to contemporary camping gear. The skeleton structure of mammoth homes, the preservation power of fermentation, the biological tricks of cold adaptation, the revolutionary creation of the bone needle, and social warmth are our 5 incredible methods today. These were all essential to our inheriting the planet. If you were as intrigued by these survival strategies as I was, please subscribe so you can join us for further in-depth discussions of human history. Tell me before you go, which strategy is the most insane? Would you make it through the mammoth bone homes or the stink meat? Comment down below. Thank you for viewing and continue to be interested.